The bully slapped a 12-year-old black boy in a diner, not knowing that his father was a mafia boss. The slap echoed through the diner like a gunshot. Leo's face, only 12 years old, turned to the side with the force of the blow as his school backpack fell to the dirty tile floor. Coins rolled in all directions. "Learn to walk straight, kid," shouted Carter Vance, 16, who stood 6 feet tall. His fists were still clenched, the gold football team ring leaving a red mark on the child's cheek. Fat Tony's Burger was the kind of place where students stopped after school. Cheap, noisy, and with little supervision from the staff. Carter had ruled that territory for 2 years, charging protection money from the younger kids and always finding reasons to humiliate those he considered inferior. Leo slowly got up, touching his bruised face. His dark eyes showed no fear, something that should have alerted Carter. But the bully was too busy, showing off to his friends who were laughing at the nearby tables. "Sorry," Leo muttered, starting to gather his scattered coins. It was the snack money his grandmother had given him that morning, carefully counted to last the whole week. "Sorry doesn't pay for my sneakers you stepped on." Carter kicked the coins away. "You know how much these cost? More than your whole house, I bet." The other teenagers laughed louder. Phones came out of pockets. Nothing like humiliating someone and still getting likes on Instagram. What none of them noticed was Leo discreetly turning on the recorder on his cell phone and sliding the device under a nearby table. The employee behind the counter, a middle-aged woman named Betty, hesitated for a moment. Carter was the son of an important local businessman. Leo was just another poor kid from the neighborhood. She lowered her eyes and pretended not to see. "My dad always says that people like you need to learn to respect people like us," Carter continued, pushing Leo against the wall. "Maybe a harsher lesson will teach you some manners." That's when Leo did something unexpected. Instead of crying or begging, he looked Carter straight in the eye and said with disturbing calm, "My dad also teaches me about respect and about consequences." Carter laughed. "Your father? What father? I bet you don't even have one like most." The sentence died in the air when Leo finished. "Silvio Rossi, maybe you know the name." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Carter, with all his teenage arrogance, had grown up hearing whispers about the Rossi family. Stories told in hushed tones in the city's bars, businesses that ran without interference, problems that simply disappeared. But Carter was too far gone to back down now, especially with everyone filming. "Liar," he growled. But his voice betrayed a note of uncertainty. Leo just smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes and made him look years older than his 12 years. "Dad always says that family is sacred and that whoever messes with family, well, you'll find out." As Carter processed those words, Leo calmly picked up his cell phone, checked that the recording was perfect, and put the device away. His movements were precise, calculated, far too mature for a child who had just been assaulted. The cafeteria remained deathly silent. Carter looked around, realizing for the first time that he might have just made the biggest mistake of his privileged teenage life. If you're enjoying this story of how an arrogant bully is about to discover that he completely underestimated his victim, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will show that some lessons in respect cost much more than a simple apology. Carter Vance wasn't just your average bully. He was the product of a family that had learned to use power and influence to get what they wanted. In the 3 days following the incident at Fat Tony's, he set about turning Leo's school life into a calculated hell. "Hey, Rossi," Carter shouted down the hallway of Lincoln High School, deliberately pronouncing the surname with contempt. "Your Mafia daddy ain't going to protect you in here." Leo continued walking calmly toward his math class, ignoring the laughter of Carter's friends. His backpack had mysteriously disappeared from his locker for the 3rd time that week, and someone had stuck an offensive note in his desk. What Carter didn't realize was that Leo photographed every incident, wrote down every date, cataloged every witness. At 12, he had already learned from his father that documentation was power, and power well used was justice. "Vance is testing boundaries," Leo muttered on the phone during lunch, sitting alone on the patio. "Dad always says that small fish make a lot of noise before they get caught." On the other end of the line, Silvio Rossi's deep, calm voice replied, "Son, sometimes you have to let people like that hang themselves with their own rope. Keep watching, keep learning." On Thursday afternoon, Carter decided to escalate things even further. During gym class, he orchestrated an accident where Leo was elbowed in the stomach during a basketball game. The teacher, Coach Miller, who knew very well who Carter's father was in the community, pretended not to see. "Watch your step, Rossi," Carter whispered as Leo recovered on the floor. "Accidents happen when you don't know your place." But it was on Friday that Carter made his fatal mistake. During recess, he and 4 friends surrounded Leo near the bathrooms, away from the security cameras. It was the perfect place for humiliation without official witnesses. You know what, Rossi? Carter pushed Leo against the wall. I'm tired of your mafia stories. My dad knows everyone important in this town. If your family was really dangerous, I would have heard about it. Leo looked Carter straight in the eye with the same unsettling calm as always. Maybe you don't know the right people to hear the right stories, liar. Carter clenched his fist. I bet your father doesn't even exist, just like most. Be careful what you say next. Leo interrupted, his voice low, but laden with an authority that shouldn't exist in a 12-year-old. Carter hesitated for a microsecond, then regained his bravado. Or what are you going to call your imaginary daddy? Then Leo did something completely unexpected. Instead of backing down or protesting, he smiled and pulled out his cell phone. Actually, good idea, Leo. The voice that answered was instantly recognizable, deep, controlled, with a subtle Italian accent that the whole town knew from local news reports about successful businessmen. Silvio Rossi. Hi, Dad. I'm here with Carter Vance. You remember I told you about him? Carter and his friends recoiled involuntarily. That voice on the phone. They knew it. Everyone in town knew it. Oh yes, the Vance boy. The voice paused. Son of the real estate developer, right? Interesting family. Give him the phone. Leo handed the phone to Carter, who was visibly pale. He wants to talk to you. Carter took the phone with trembling hands. Hello. Carter Vance. The voice wasn't threatening. It was worse. It was polite, calm, almost friendly. I hear you and my son have had some misunderstandings. Sir, let me explain something about family, kid. In my culture, family is sacred. When someone messes with my family, it becomes my personal problem. Carter swallowed hard. In the background, his friends began to discreetly move away. Now, I'm sure this was just a misunderstanding between young people, but I want you to understand one thing very clearly. My son Leo is polite, respectful, intelligent. He doesn't look for trouble, but I solve problems. It's been my specialty for many years. Why, yes, sir. I understand, good. Give the phone back to Leo. Carter handed the phone back as if it were burning. Leo spoke briefly with his father in Italian, then hung up. He enjoyed talking to you, Leo said politely. Dad always says it's important to get to know the families of my schoolmates, and that night, Carter Vance found it impossible to sleep. Every shadow in the window, every noise in the street made his heart race. He had grown up hearing whispers about the Rossi family. Businesses that never failed, competitors who simply disappeared from the market, authorities who never asked questions, and he had assaulted, humiliated, and threatened the son of the man everyone respected or feared. Too much to mention aloud. Leo, on the other hand, slept peacefully, as he always did when he knew the pieces were moving exactly where they should be. On Saturday morning, Carter's father received an unexpected call. Vance, Silvio Rossi here. I hear our sons met at school. How about we talk about this in person? I have some ideas about how our boys can get along better. The meeting was scheduled for Monday. Carter spent the entire weekend wondering what that conversation could mean for his family. Each new humiliation Carter had imposed only strengthened something inside. Leo that the bully couldn't see, a silent strength fueled by the very injustice they were trying to impose. What that privileged teenager didn't know was that each act of contempt was writing his own sentence, and that on Monday he would discover that messing with the wrong family has consequences that go far beyond the school walls. Monday arrived like a sentence. Carter Vance had spent the entire weekend imagining increasingly terrifying scenarios about what that meeting with Silvio Rossi could mean for his family. At 8:30 a.m., he arrived at school with deep, dark circles under his eyes, constantly looking over his shoulder. Every dark car that drove down the street made his heart race. Leo, on the other hand, entered the courtyard of Lincoln High School with his usual calm, politely greeting the teachers and organizing, his books in his locker with military precision. Vance, principal. Gibson's voice echoed down the hallway. My office now. Carter felt his legs buckle. Was it about the meeting? About the assaults? About something worse? In the office, Gibson closed the door with a serious expression. Your father called me. He said you and Leo Rossi had some disagreements. Would you like to explain what happened? Carter swallowed hard. How could he explain that he had threatened and assaulted the son of one of the most feared men in town? It was just a silly argument, sir. An argument that resulted in you hitting him? Gibson opened a folder. Because we have witnesses, Carter, and videos. It was then that Carter realized the extent of the problem. Leo hadn't just recorded the phone conversation with his father. He had documented everything. Every push, every insult, every humiliation of the last few days was recorded and organized like a professional dossier. Look, Carter Gibson, you're a good student. But this he showed screenshots of messages Carter had sent to friends mocking Leo. This is systematic bullying and against a minor. The messages had been captured and printed with the date and time. Leo had created a complete file of Carter's actions, including statements from other students who had witnessed the attacks. How did he get these messages? Carter whispered, horrified. Apparently, some of your friends decided to cooperate when they found out who Leo's father was. Gibson closed the folder. 3-day suspension, and you will apologize publicly. As Carter left the office completely devastated, Leo was in the library quietly working on a science project. But it wasn't a typical school project. It was a detailed presentation on how technology can be used to document injustice. That's when Mrs. Davies, the librarian, approached him. Leo, your Uncle Lorenzo is here to see you. Lorenzo Rossi looked nothing like what Carter would expect from someone in the family. Tall, elegant, wearing a discreet suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He looked more like a successful lawyer than any mafia stereotype. Ciao, nipote. Lorenzo kissed Leo's head affectionately. Dad told me about your problem at school. It's not a problem anymore, Zio Lorenzo. Leo replied in fluent Italian. It's being resolved. Lorenzo smiled proudly. Your father wants you to learn that there are many ways to resolve conflicts. Some are more educational than others. In the teacher's lounge, news of Lorenzo Rossi's visit spread like wildfire. Everyone knew who the Rossi family was, even if they never spoke about it openly. Some whispered about generous contributions to school projects. Others mentioned how discipline, problems involving certain families simply disappeared. Coach Miller, who had purposely ignored the aggression during physical education, suddenly remembered witnessing possible irregularities in the games. Betty from Fat Tony's called the school, offering to be a witness to the original incident. At 3:30 p.m., Robert Vance arrived at the school driving his BMW, his face tense and his hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. Silvio Rossi was already waiting in the parking lot, leaning against an immaculate black Cadillac, calmly reading an Italian newspaper. Mr. Vance, Silvio greeted him politely, folding the newspaper with military precision. Thank you for coming. Bert tried to maintain the businesslike composure that had always worked in his real estate. Negotiations. Mr. Rossi, I'm sure we can resolve this like civilized men. Of course, Silvio smiled. Let's talk in my office. It's more private. For the next 20 minutes, students and school staff noticed Robert Vance getting out of the Cadillac with a deathly pallor and visibly trembling hands. He walked straight to where Carter was waiting, his eyes avoiding eye contact with anyone. We're moving, Robert whispered to his son. At the end of the month, Dad, what happened? What did he say to you? Robert looked around paranoid, then pulled Carter into a secluded corner. He showed me photos, son. Photos of all our properties, our house, your class schedules. He knew where your mother shops, where I have lunch, even the name of our dog's veterinarian. Carter felt his blood run cold. But he didn't make any threats, did he, Dad? He didn't need to. Robert ran his hand nervously through his hair. He just said that family is important to him and that he hoped I would teach you the value of respecting other families. While father and son talked desperately, Leo calmly organized his books in the closet. Lorenzo had left school, but not before handing Leo a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a new cell phone, not a regular smartphone, but something clearly more sophisticated. A handwritten note in Italian read, "To document your education with love, Zio Lorenzo." That evening, Leo sat down at the dinner table with his parents, in their modest but impeccably organized home. His mother, Julia, served homemade lasagna, while Silvio read emails on his tablet. Dad, Leo said calmly, Carter Vance is moving out at the end of the month. Silvio looked at his son over his reading glasses. And how do you know that? Because I've learned that when you plant the right seeds, you can predict exactly when and how they will grow. Julia stopped serving. Impressed by the maturity of her son's words, Silvio slowly closed his tablet. You're learning, Leo, but remember, real power isn't about making people fear you. It's about making them respect you for who you are, not who your father is. I know, Dad. That's why Carter Vance doesn't know the most important part yet. What part? Leo smiled. Not a child's smile, but something much more calculated. That I documented everything not just to protect myself. I documented it to protect his next victims. In Leo's carefully organized school folder, there was evidence of at least 8 other students, Carter had bullied over the past 2 years. Names, dates, witnesses, even recorded conversations where Carter bragged about his actions. Tomorrow, Leo continued, I'm going to hand all of this over to the student council. Not as Leo Rossi, son of Silvio, but as Leo Rossi, a student who refuses to let others go through what I went through. Silvio leaned back in his chair, a mixture of pride and concern in his eyes. His 12-year-old son was demonstrating not only strategic intelligence, but something much rarer, a sense of justice that went beyond personal revenge. The next day, Carter arrived at school to find that his transfer had been expedited. But he also discovered something much worse. A presentation was being prepared by the student council on patterns of toxic behavior at school, and his name appeared on almost every slide. Leo had turned his own victimization into a systematic campaign against bullying at Lincoln High School. Every documented assault, every organized witness, every piece of evidence cataloged with the precision of someone who had learned from an early age that documentation is power. Carter realized too late that he had not only been defeated, he had been completely outmaneuvered by a mind far more brilliant than his own. A mind that had turned suffering into strategy, humiliation into education, and personal revenge into collective justice. While Carter packed his bags for the forced move, Leo prepared something that would change not only his own life, but the lives of dozens of other students who would finally have a voice. What no one knew, yet, was that this anti-bullying campaign was only the first step in a much larger plan. A plan that would prove that age does not determine wisdom, and that sometimes true leadership emerges exactly where we least expect to find it. The student council presentation on Thursday morning attracted an audience that no one had expected. The Lincoln High School auditorium was packed. Students, parents, teachers, and even a few members of the local press who had been discreetly invited. Leo took the stage carrying a laptop and a projector, wearing his impeccably ironed school shirt, and moving with a quiet confidence he had learned from watching his father at business meetings. My name is Leo Rossi, and today I'm going to present a project on patterns of toxic behavior in educational environments. His voice was clear, professional, nothing like that of a traumatized 12-year-old. Carter Vance was sitting in the third row, forced to attend by order of the principal as part of his educational suspension. His hands sweated as he watched Leo connect the projector cables with military precision. The first image that appeared on the screen made the entire auditorium whisper collectively. It was a detailed timeline of the last 2 years, showing dozens of incidents of bullying at the school organized by date, aggressor, and victim. Over the course of 24 months, I have systematically documented 47 cases of intimidation, physical assault, and psychological humiliation at the school, Leo began, his voice echoing through the sound system, all involving the same pattern: older economically privileged students attacking younger children or those from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Carter felt his blood run cold when his name appeared, highlighted in red in more than half of the cases listed. Leo clicked to the next slide. This is Carter Vance physically assaulting 11-year-old Kevin Martinez in September 23. The video began to play, filmed discreetly by another student, showing Carter pushing the smaller boy against the lockers and stealing his lunch money. This is Carter Vance publicly humiliating Lisa Chun for not speaking perfect English in October 2023. Another video, this time showing Carter crudely mimicking the girl's accent while others laughed. With each new piece of evidence presented, Carter sank further into his chair. Around him, parents and students began to look his way with expressions of revulsion and disbelief. Here we have text messages where Carter Vance brags about his actions. Leo projected screenshots of WhatsApp conversations where Carter bragged to friends. Today I taught another brat not to cross my path. These guys need to learn who's boss here. Carter's mother, sitting in the front row, covered her face with her hands. His father, Robert Vance, was visibly pale, realizing that the problem was much bigger than a schoolyard fight. But Leo was just getting started. What I discovered through this investigation, Leo continued with the coldness of an experienced prosecutor, is that this behavior was not isolated. It was systematic, coordinated, and most importantly, deliberately ignored by the school administration. The next slide showed emails between Carter and other students, planning operations to humiliate specific targets. There was even a list with names of victims and recommended methods for each one. Coach Miller. Leo looked directly at the physical education teacher. You witnessed at least 12 physical assaults during your classes, and chose not to intervene in any of them. I have witnesses and videos of each incident right here. Miller tried to stand up to protest, but the evidence was irrefutable. Leo projected videos from the gym. Security camera clearly showing the assaults taking place while Miller looked the other way. Betty Santos, employee at Fat Tony's Burger, Leo continued. You admitted on tape that you knew about Carter's aggressive behavior, but chose not to report it because he was the son of an important family. The audio recording began to play throughout the room, Betty's voice clearly saying, Look, I know the Vance kid is trouble, but his dad has influence. Better not mess with that. Carter tried to get up to leave, but found that it would be impossible. Silvio Rossi had arrived at the auditorium 5 minutes earlier, strategically positioning himself near the door. Not to intimidate, just to observe his son's education. 2 men in discreet suits flanked the other exits. Finally, Leo reached the climax of his presentation. We have last Monday's incident at Fat Tony's Burger where Carter Vance physically assaulted me in front of multiple witnesses. Tommy's original video began to play on the big screen. Every slap, every racist word, every moment of humiliation was reproduced in high definition for the entire auditorium to see. But then Leo did something no one expected. He paused the video at the exact moment Carter hit him and turned to the audience. Do you know what my first reaction was when this happened? It wasn't anger, it was sadness. Sadness because I realized that Carter Vance is a product of a system that teaches privileged children that they can treat other human beings like objects. Carter was visibly shaking now. Tears of humiliation streamed down his face as hundreds of people watched him. But this presentation isn't about Carter Vance, Leo continued, his voice soft but relentless. It's about all of us, about how a community can choose between protecting violent, privileged people or protecting defenseless children. Leo projected the final slide, a photo of each of Carter's 23 victims over 2 years with their names and ages. Children aged 10 to 14 who had suffered in silence while adults looked the other way. Carter Vance destroyed the self-esteem of 23 children. He stole lunch money from at least 15 students. He caused trauma that some of these children will carry with them forever. And all of this was allowed because he had the right last name and the right parents. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Carter was completely broken, sobbing uncontrollably while his mother tried to comfort him. Robert Vance stared at the floor, realizing that the family's reputation was destroyed forever. My proposal, Leo concluded, is simple. 0 tolerance for bullying, regardless of last name. Mandatory training for staff on how to identify and report aggression. And most importantly, a support program for victims who have been silenced for too long. The ovation was spontaneous and deafening. Students stood up. Parents applauded. Teachers nodded in approval. Leo had turned his personal humiliation into an educational revolution. Carter Vance tried to hide behind his mother, but it was too late. Phones captured every second of his shame. In a few hours, he would be known nationally not as a powerful bully, but as the coward who attacked children and cried when confronted with the truth. As the Vance family hurried out of the auditorium, Leo stepped off the stage to be greeted by dozens of students and parents. Silvio watched from the back of the room, a discreet smile of pride on his face. Carter had learned a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. When you choose to humiliate someone you consider weaker, there is always the possibility that that person is much stronger than you ever imagined. And sometimes the consequences of our choices come packaged with a lesson in dignity that cuts deeper than any physical aggression ever could. The question that remained was not whether Carter would survive the public humiliation, but whether he would find a way to become a better person after having his true nature exposed for the whole world to see. 3 months later, Lincoln High School was unrecognizable. Leo had become student council president by unanimous vote, leading an anti-bullying program that attracted national attention. Carter Vance never recovered from the public humiliation. His family moved to another state, but the videos of the presentation followed him. Universities rejected his applications when they discovered his history. Summer jobs evaporated when employers Googled his name. Leo, on the other hand, received full scholarships from 5 prestigious universities. His document to protect campaign spread to 200 schools in 12 states. Dad always said that the best revenge is success. Leo explained to a CNN documentary about bullying. I didn't destroy Carter Vance. I just showed who he really was. Silvio watched proudly from the audience during his son's graduation. Leo received 3 awards: academic merit, community leadership, and civil courage. Carter watched the ceremony on YouTube from his new school, where no one knew his past. Still, every time he saw a child being bullied, he remembered Leo's words, "Family is sacred." The lesson was simple. Underestimating someone based on appearances is the first step to your own downfall. If this story of how a child turned humiliation into leadership has inspired you, subscribe to the channel, because sometimes heroes wear school uniforms and carry backpacks, proving that dignity has no age and justice waits for no one to grow.